stagflation in our future, retail sales slump in January, the Canadian Revenue Agency not laying off the carbon tax employees, Carney goes to Edmonton, and the media becoming a federal government department. All that and more on the Really Big Show in our Friday edition. I've got Ian Burns here, managing editor, on the line. I'm Jim Check with Kelowna Now, and we've got a really cool show for you today. And you ready to kick it off there, Ian?
Absolutely. Let's go straight into this depressing economic news.
Yeah, Governor Macklin predicts crisis. Even using the word stagflation. I'd say I used that word a couple of years ago and said these policies would lead to stagflation. And you can go check it on my LinkedIn. A couple of years ago, I said we're heading towards stagflation. The policies that we had in place would lead to this event. And that's where we are.
Well, he tried to play that down, didn't he? He said, his exact words are, I grew up in the 1970s. So when people say the word stagflation, I think of double-digit inflation and double-digit unemployment. And he goes on to say that's not what we're talking about. But I mean, we're not looking at that kind of shock, which you have to remember was a very short period of time anyway. We're not looking at that kind of a shock. I think we're looking at more of a much lower level and much more prolonged shock, which in many ways you could say could be worse.
Yeah, small business is the largest month-over-month spike in price increase intention since the pandemic, and did not expect to hire. That's the big one, according to the research notes. Only 11% of business services said they were looking for new employees, which is a completely different picture from a couple of years ago. Nearly twice as many, 19%, planned layoffs over the next 90 days. Business confidence has fell to a lower mark than it did in any time during the 2020 pandemic and the 2008 financial crisis, or 9/11, said the Federation. We've been reporting these numbers, and a lot of these numbers, a lot of them are tied to what's going on with the anticipated tariff war or the trade war. But a lot of this is we were in pretty bad shape to begin with, right? And it's the policies of the last 10 years that have kind of put us in this spot of economic despair. That GDP per capita that gap's been widening, since for the past 10 years. You can pull those stats up and you can look at them.
Yeah, I think Canada's kind of been dining out on, the last half century or so of overall pretty positive economic performance. And it's kind of now the gas tank is just about to run out, really, isn't it? We haven't refueled in many years. And I think that the bottom, that's the nature of the crisis. Without without COVID and without this trade war with the US, we could probably have kind of trundled along, but it would have been more of the same kind of very, very low growth, GDP per capita probably declining, but this is kind of a shock that has drawn a lot of people's attention to it, I would say. But there's one thing that I noticed here, by the way, which is what you just mentioned there, that about people not looking for employees. I wonder if now the federal government will be able to send bills to all of the businesses that screamed hysterically for immigration to be increased by enormous numbers. Can we as taxpayers now send them a bill for each one of those migrants that came in? Now that they're telling us that far from having a labor shortage now, there's a labor glut apparently. Because I think maybe they owe us a little bit of money.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you, because there's the burdens on the taxpayer right now, and it's the policies again. We say this over and over again. Nations with abundant energy tend to have great economies. Nations that have no energy or suppress their energies tend to have problems, and we've seen that here in Canada and in your own homeland of the United Kingdom. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later as well.
Yeah, I mean, and then you do also have another category of country which has abundant energy, abundant natural resources, but is also very poor. And the reason for that is extraordinarily bad management. And I'm thinking now, off the top of my head, Venezuela, for example. Venezuela has the world's largest oil reserves. Venezuela should be we talk about Canada should be the richest country in the world. Arguably, Venezuela should be the richest country in the world, or at least one of them. And yet it's an abomination. They've been eating pets in Venezuela for quite a long time now because they're so desperate to survive because
Yeah.
the sort of borderline communists, the hardline socialist authoritarians who sort of kidnapped the population of Venezuela a number of years ago have no idea how to run a country. So now it's hell on earth. And, we could mention other countries like Iran, the Congo, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is blessed with all the minerals that you could imagine, and yet is so dysfunctional. The management of that country is so low grade that they live in poverty. So it's kind of, yeah, you need that. You need energy to be prosperous, pretty much. Though you do see other examples like Singapore, and there are countries that do it without natural resources. But in general, if you've got them, you can be wealthy. Let's put it that way. And there
Yeah.
are lots of examples of countries that have done that, like our favorite friend, Norway. But the United States is another example of a country like that. But then, you have to choose. What do you want to be? Do you want to be Venezuela or do you want to be Norway? Maybe that's the option that should be put
Yeah.
to the Canadian people.
And we've had that bad management here, and that's been said over and over and over again. Kevin O'Leary of Dragon's Den has said that, like Justin Trudeau and the Liberals have been the most incompetent managers in Canadian history. And, with all the vast resources, I would argue Canada is the most resource-rich nation when we talk about diversity of that. Venezuela may have more oil, but definitely when we talk about diversity and our land size, we have the second largest land mass. The only one that I think could challenge us in that regard would be Russia.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, um, Russia is considered to have the best variety of natural resources, all in either Russia or the United States. But I think Canada is still in the top five, and there's no way to challenge that. We can disagree about whether it's number one or number four or whatever, but it's in the top five. And I think when you consider how many countries there are in the world, like around about 200 countries in the world now, to be in the top five for, just wealth lying under your feet,
Right.
that's the jackpot. That is, you've won the lottery.
Yeah, I would say, like, if you want to make it a hockey analogy, we're a first round pick that is disappointed and about get sent down to the farm team. You know what I mean? Like, we're a first round pick that has been so disappointing. So there you go. If you're a hockey fan, figure that out, right?
Oh, we've won the lottery, and then we've given all of the money to our friends, our parents.
We've been
We've
drinking.
given a massive donation to Greenpeace, and
Yep.
now we've run out of money.
Well, I would say that in case we're Johnny Depp. We've just all of our friends and everybody else has blown it, and now we have nothing again. There you
Yeah,
go.
and we've just got a load of like $500,000 guitars lying around the
Yeah.
house.
Stats Canada says retail sales down 0.6% in January. And a lot of that having to do with an auto slump, right? So the agency says that motor vehicle and parts dealers dropped 2.6%. So yeah, so retail sales disappointing as well. Canada economy continues to sputter at best, right? And these aren't related to the trade tariffs. These are related to, just the general economy as it's been moving along. Like, we were in trouble long before the Trump trade war. He just took advantage of us because we're in such poor shape here. And if you look at, David Eby saying here, Premier Eby saying that, nobody's investing in Canada. Well, that's been going on for about 3 years right now because of regulation and just the capital gains tax that they were going to put on. Now that they're going to scrap it. But we've done so many policies that have basically scared capital out of this nation.
Including in British Columbia, including by the NDP.
Yeah.
Particularly, I'm thinking of his predecessor, the late John Hogan, who seemed to do everything that he could possibly do to scare away natural resources developments during his time as Premier. So, I mean, you don't have to look far, David Eby, to answer that question.
And Holly Doan Blacklock's story here, she's been chasing this one down. No carbon tax layoffs yet. The Canadian Revenue Agency yesterday would not explain why it's keeping hundreds of employees in its carbon tax unit since Prime Minister Carney announced that he was eliminating the consumer charge. A battalion of clerks were hired to process that revenue. And you want to hear those numbers on how much that was costing us?
Yeah, it's not pretty, is it?
No.
In total,
Yeah.
$200 million for administration.
Yeah. So
That doesn't make good viewing.
when Trudeau and them said that the Canadians are getting that money back, well, not until the CRA was taking a cut right off the top, right?
Well, some Canadians were getting a lot more back from that than others, it seems. I mean, he would talk about a couple of $1,000s a year for the best off, the families that did the best. But obviously, who he forgot to mention were the civil servants earning over $100,000 a year with a glorious pension for
A, to-
administering this shuffling of the money.
a total of 474 staff. So that's the higher. That's the bloating of government assigned to the carbon tax paperwork. There you go.
But Mark Carney hasn't removed them,
Oh,
Blacklocks tells us.
yeah.
But it wouldn't be too smart to fire your own voter base and power base, would it? Right before an election.
And that is one of the things the government's been bloating, and not just in Ottawa, in Victoria as well. That is one thing that, the public sector has been growing while the private sector shrinks.
Indeed, yeah. And I mean, when you talk about analogies, economic analogies, the last time something like that went on was, I'm starting to think of like the 1930s, for example, and FDR and the way to try and get out of the depression. Obviously that didn't work. Oftentimes people say, oh yeah, FDR and all these Depression era leaders, they were so smart because they gave people like make work jobs. They sent them off to like rake the leaves and stuff like that, just so that they could get people in employment. And that solved the crisis. But obviously anybody that's actually studied that era knows that that's not true. The economy was still garbage until Hitler decided to invade Poland. That's what changed that's what changed the world economy or the Western economy, because then there was massive rearmament and war. That's what changed it.
Yeah. Well, we can think of Danny Williams even here in Canada. Danny Williams in Newfoundland, when he used to hire people to move a pile of rocks from one place to another, and then once they got their stamps for EI, then he would lay them off and hire the next crew to move the rocks back to the other place, and said that was a God-given right of the Newfoundlanders.
Yeah, well, there's an interesting there's a poll come out by Angus Reid Institute this morning, and it's about like supply management and interprovincial barriers and all the rest of it. And for some reason, Newfoundland is one of the most strongly resistant to getting rid of all those barriers, and supply management as well, and things like that. I mean, I think that might have something to do with what you're mentioning there as well, which is just these broken economies that almost want to feast on themselves, and it's just a cycle, and
Yeah.
it never really produces anything. It's just kind of vested interests. That is, that's not a good way to run your economy, is it? Suffice it to say, you have to be kind of heading somewhere.
I've worked with plenty of Newfoundlanders, and in the mine sites and in the oil field when I was working in those blue collar jobs. A lot of Newfoundlanders, and then I've also known quite a few Newfoundlanders in the military, and they're all working in different areas because they couldn't find jobs in Newfoundland. And Newfoundland had some offshore drilling going at some point, and they had some mining going on, but again, tougher and tougher to get that stuff going. And then so a lot of them people are looking for work outside of the province of Newfoundland.
Yeah, well, if we're going to rearm for this, to claim sovereignty of the Arctic and fight Russia and all the rest of it, then plenty of jobs in the military, one would expect.
I'd like to take this moment to thank our viewers, though. Like, we do have some regulars now that are watching, and I hear from them, and then we see them in the comments, and even the people that are shut in. Like to say good morning to Liz and Andrea that listens on a continual basis there. And then I think we have Brett that's usually on there every day too. So we do appreciate that. And beautiful shot in the Okanagan and behind us, right? That's one thing. Look at that blue sky. Beautiful, beautiful day in the Okanagan. That's our live shot here from Kelowna now.
Yeah, it
But
looks lovely up there on the what is that? That's where the fire was, isn't it? The kind of
that's in the back,
McDougal. Yeah, it's a
and
lovely
that
place to hike up there.
and that hill in the background with the snow layer there too, right? So, um, and then Carney says he wants a big mandate, so he's getting pretty confident there. Suppose he's going to call that election on Sunday. We'll see if that happens. And in this election, which has a minimum campaign period of 37 days. It'll be you and I will be busy for 37 days if that's what happens. Um, Canada will elect 343 MPs. That's what it is. And then guess where most of them are?
Yeah.
122 from Ontario and 78 from Quebec. Right? That's over 200 right there. For the bulk of them are in those two provinces. And then 43 from British Columbia, 37 from Alberta. Alberta contributing the most to the GDP, really, like on Ontario actually does, but I mean, it's damn close. And definitely the oil and gas is the largest single contributor, and they get a measly 37. They pony up the most money, and they they don't get much in return for that. 14 for Saskatchewan and Scott Moe there. 14 for Manitoba, 11 for Nova Scotia, 10 for New Brunswick, 7 from the Rock, and 4 from PEI, and 1 in the Yukon, and 1 in the Territories, and 1 in Nunavut.
It gets good for the ratio is pretty good for Nunavut, isn't it? I mean, the
Yeah,
population of the whole territory of Nunavut is about a quarter of the population of Kelowna, and but they still get an MP.
it's a beautiful area. If you've never been up to the north, you should go. The northern lights are absolutely spectacular when you go from the north, especially when it's minus 50 and stuff, like on a clear day. The stars seem like you can reach out and touch them, as do the northern lights.
Somewhere I've always wanted to go is right up to the far north of the Northwest Territories from, I don't know if you ever read Jack London novels and
I
short
have.
stories, but Jack London writes about like the Mackenzie and where the Mackenzie goes out into the Arctic. I would like to see that purely because of Jack London, really.
That was one of my favorite books, actually. One of the Jack London. I can't remember the title. It was about a wolf, though. The guy was like watching a wolf the whole time. I can't remember the name of the title. You might know it, but
Call of the Wild, maybe?
I think that's what it is, actually. There you go.
Yeah,
Um,
White Fang was the other one. Really good one. White Fang.
White Fang, yeah, that is the one I loved. Yep, White Fang. There you go. And I've read a lot of Jack London stuff. Carney, Prime Minister Carney, has added co-founder of the controversial lobbying group that advocates for increasing Canada's population to 100 million by 2100. And then Pierre Poilievre was speaking on that the other day, saying that they voted against it. So, I mean, we already have really stressed healthcare, really stressed housing. Increasing to 100 million by 2100 would be a very ambitious goal, I would say, and it'll have to be done through massive immigration.
I feel like before the sort of like before the Trudeau era and before mass immigration really got big in Canada over the last sort of like 6, 7 years, whatever. I mean, if you look at the statistics, that it basically coincides with Trudeau's government. But before that period, I think this kind of idea actually was popular in Canada. And I can remember speaking to a lot of Canadians, like really sensible people who you wouldn't call them kind of like mad revolutionaries or whatever, or left-wing activists. They looked at this sort of thing and they thought, yeah, we do need more people because that's the reason that everything's so expensive. That's the reason that flights are so expensive, and that's why we can't have better infrastructure and so on. There was this definite belief, like really strongly held belief, that that was important for Canada to do that for its own sake. But I feel like since the Canadian people have had a little bit of a tease, a little tiny droplet of a taste of what mass immigration looks like over the last few years, they now definitely don't want this to happen. So that tells you everything you need to know, really. I think people like the idea of that in the abstract. They like the idea of Canada having 100 million people and being like stronger and richer potentially, at least in terms of GDP, if not GDP per capita. But they don't like what it actually means, which is importing millions and millions and millions of people and stressing already stressed infrastructure. So, I mean, I feel like, we talked there about the North. I feel like maybe if this plan was, yeah, we need 100 million people and 70% of the new 60 million are going to have to be above like the 55th parallel or something like that. I feel like people are like, oh, okay, yeah, let's populate the north. But I don't think people want the
Nobody
main
wants,
urban areas to
yeah,
be more populous than they already are.
most of the immigrants don't want to go to the north. They want to go to Toronto and Vancouver and major cities, Edmonton.
Exactly. And the people who live in the north definitely don't want immigrants to come to the north. Well, I mean, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but they don't want like the Northwest Territories and Nunavut to be turned into huge provinces of like 20 million people and stuff. Of course they don't. What they like about it is that it's sparsely populated and wild, and obviously there's like loads of indigenous um territories up there as well, and they would not be favorable to that, I suspect. So yeah, I mean, if you're going to have 100 million people in Canada, it's going to mean that Toronto is going to be like 20 million people. Vancouver is going to be 20 million people. Nobody really wants that though. People that actually live there don't want that to happen.
One of the things I would say is that Mark Carney is trying to differentiate himself from Trudeau's Liberals, but the longer he kind of like is in that seat, the more it seems like he's putting back or maintaining these similar policies. Because that was a Trudeau policy, right? The 100 million by 2100, the carbon tax scheme, all those types of things seem to be very similar.
Yeah, though, quite an amusing time for you to say that, because literally as you were saying those words, that Carney's continuing the Trudeau policies, we got a press release from the Prime Minister's office saying that Carney is going to cancel the capital gains tax, which I think we already expected. But
Yeah.
this is yesterday. Pierre Poilievre accused Carney of being a plagiarist. He said he's plagiarizing my policies because he took the he wants to take the GST off new home purchases, and then now he's done this. Poilievre's going to be pulling his hair out here, isn't he? Because it's like everything that Poilievre has said, Carney is going ahead and doing.
Well, when I interviewed Sean Fraser, who was the housing minister at the time, I suggested that to him as well, and I knew that was Poilievre's platform. And at that time, he said, well, they didn't really have any plans for that. But Sean Fraser says he will not be running as well.
Yeah. So Carney, he's differentiating himself in some areas, but then not others, as we see. Like we've got the Century Initiative chap brought in. We've got a commitment to, the emissions cap and so on. We've got a few elements from the previous Prime Minister, but then particularly on like consumer economics, on like microeconomics or whatever you want to say, it seems like he's taken a different path.
So we got this clip here to play. He was in Edmonton. We're going to talk a little about that. But Mark Carney went to Edmonton, and there's a couple clips here. You guys can do it. I know. All right. What's up?
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this announcement. And those who are visiting us, welcome to Edmonton, Alberta's capital city, and the city of festivals. And so, good afternoon. And today is an exciting day. We're working incredibly hard in Edmonton to build housing our city needs.
There you go. That clip has kind of been blowing up on the internet there. I posted on my LinkedIn as well. One of the things to note there, a lot of people have pointed out, is that he walked up to those working class people with his hands in his pockets. And, Poilievre is more typically out there shaking hands, and not so much there with Mark Carney. And then the other thing that I've noted there, that when I lived in Edmonton a number of years ago, when back in the Oiler heydays, I think that's when Mark Carney was there as well. Back in the Oiler heydays, they used to call it the City of Champions and the oil capital of Canada. Now they call it the City of Festivals. And I think Poilievre pointed out today in his press conference that if they'd built either one of the Northern Gateway Pipeline or the East-West Pipeline, that would have brought tens of thousands of jobs to the city of Edmonton and made it again the oil capital of Canada.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you mentioned that press conference that Poilievre put on this morning, because he had a very similar array of high visibility jacket wearing people behind him, and he was in the crowd and shaking hands and laughing and patting arms, patting biceps even. So he was kind of like, yeah, Poilievre is a lot more at ease, I think. But also you have to remember, Poilievre has been a politician for what, more than 20 years, I would say. Yeah, something like that. He's been a politician basically since he was like out of university, since he was just a kid. So he knows how to work a crowd. Whereas Mark Carney, I mean, I feel like his media management people in the background will have had their heads in their hands, really, because he doesn't look like he knows what he's doing. He doesn't look like he knows how to be a politician.
Well,
He's walking around with his hands in his pockets. It's not so much that they didn't shake his hand, it's more that he didn't shake their hand. He
that's
didn't
right,
even take his hands out of his pockets.
because when you come up as the authority, you need to make that first move because they're not sure what they're supposed to do.
Absolutely, and they looked
And
unsure. That's what I would say. They looked awkward because they were put in an awkward position because they'd been put there so that they could be used as a prop by the prime minister, and then the prime minister just came over and said, with his hands in his pockets, basically, "How you doing?" So it's like you got to do a bit more than that. But that's what you would maybe expect from an aloof, mighty Bank
well,
of Canada governor or something like that. You would expect this kind of behavior from a finance figure or
I
some sort of face of an institution, but not the prime minister. The prime minister must touch the flesh. That's kind of part of their job, isn't it?
Yeah, I was a mine site controller, and I know we used to tour different groups, the investor group and different groups through the site all the time. And you could really tell, when what type of people showed up. And, Mark Carney is a self-described global elitist. He said that himself. I'm not making it up. That's what he said. And it comes across as like the investment people that used to come and tour the mine site, very similar, right? Because to them, this is the dirty part of the job, right? This is the like the people that do the ucky work, and then like they just want to see that, like. But when they're in Toronto and that, because I would also go to Toronto and work, because I was like the mine site controller. There, if they're there, they're shaking hands because those people they believe are on their level. But when they're at the mine site and stuff like in the workers, those people are just those are the hands that are too dirty to be shaking.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about that. I mean, maybe that is it. Maybe there's a snobbery there, but I would just say, from my perspective, my sort of knowledge of politics, it just seems to me that he doesn't have the experience, and it's yet another gaffe almost. I would argue.
Well,
But
I'm
then on
just
the other hand, the fact that he isn't um out there trying to ingratiate himself with people, that I think that is also kind of one of the reasons that he's doing well, because I think he's managed to be a politician, the prime minister, and yet he doesn't really act like a politician. And I think maybe people are sick of politicians and politicking, and they kind of look at him as a quiet guy that doesn't really do or say anything in particular. And that's maybe an advantage right now that there's
yeah.
so much hostility to politics.
It's I mean, I'm just drawing on my own experiences. Like I said, I was at the mine site, and the investment people, the same people, would come to Toronto and be completely different than the way they acted at the mine site.
Yeah, and I mean, I've observed that myself a number of times in certainly when I used to work in London, and I would see the politicians come out into the rougher parts of East London, and they didn't know what to do. They didn't know where they were, and it was like so obvious, so awkward. But then you would see them in like a nice part of London, a flash part of London, surrounded by suits, and they'd be happy as Larry because that was their milieu, and they were used to that. I mean,
Yeah.
that's definitely valid, I'd say. And also, one last thing that I would say about this is the Liberal Party, their sort of the demographic with which they perform the worst is exactly that one there. It's non-college educated. I'm going to make that assumption that they don't have university degrees, these people, because they're probably, that looks like they're working on a construction site. You usually don't need a degree to do that. But the non-university educated men of about that age, of working age, that is the worst demographic for the Liberal Party in terms of popularity. So you'd think that they would try a bit harder to win that demographic over, wouldn't you? Because that is now just almost completely the possession of the Conservative Party, that demographic. So
Do, do,
they're going to have to try harder than that if
uh,
they want those votes.
do you mean the people that actually built Canada? The hard work and hands of the people that actually built Canada, drilled for the oil, mined for the metals, and cut down the trees to build the homes? Those people, the salt of the earth.
Not only did they do that in the past tense, but they also do it now. They maintain Canada, which I think is probably even more important. These are the people that make it possible for a civil servant, a bureaucrat on $150,000 a year, to drive 20 minutes to the office for half an hour before they come home to work from home.
I think one of the requirements to run for office should be that they had to work in Canada's resource sector to have respect for what Canada is and how much hard work goes into it. I've worked out there. I've worked on a green chain, and I've worked in the mills, and I worked as a firefighter. I worked in a whole bunch of different blue collar jobs, and have so much respect for those people that go out there in 50 below and there's water spraying in your face, and you're trying to connect pipes together that are covered in clay and mud and stuff like that. Like bloody hard work, and you're working like 12, 14 hours a day. And you do it 7 days a week, and until the job's done, right? Like, in the oil field business, like in the seismic area, like you work that until it's done. It's not like you don't get Monday to Friday. It's not. It's just like you work. Say it's 3 months. You work steady for 3 months. Anyway.
Yeah, and I think I think it's completely valid, and that there is a lack of gratitude being shown to these people, but they're usually men, aren't they? Let's be honest. And men aren't being shown a lot of gratitude in general in this era
Uh,
that we
I,
live
I
in.
mean,
They're usually being shown hostility and
uh,
suspicion.
I would say though, like when I worked in the mine site, we had a lot of a blend for sure. We had a lot of females in the trades, and especially in the mill and the milling and stuff like that, and several of them underground as well. So anyway,
Yeah, statistics show that there are some, but like they
yeah,
are a minority. That's unavoidably true.
yeah. Uh, in Edmonton, also met with the Premier Danielle Smith, and that was a frank discussion for sure. And Danielle Smith laid it out. And said that she provided a specific list of demands to the next prime minister, regardless of who that is, they must address within 6 months of their term to avoid an unprecedented national unity crisis. Now there's a threat, right?
Yeah, I mean, she's she's a lot more hostile than the Premier of Quebec, who you might assume would be the one that would be, gobbing on about a lot of things. It's not really, we're not really hearing all that much from Quebec. It is Alberta, yeah, and her list is, it's quite an indictment of the Liberal Party and of Justin Trudeau. But she also
She's
said that she thinks that Carney might end up being even worse than Trudeau. So she's just, and she also basically said vote for the Conservative Party as well. She said vote for the party that's always backed the natural resources sector or something along those lines. So like she's not messing around. She's not like playing nice at all.
And Carney doled some money out while he was there to Jasper, but she said she made it clear that federal mismanagement of Jasper and Banff National Parks resulted in last year's tragic wildfire in Jasper and is endangering Banff, and the situation should be rectified immediately. I mean, a lot of people have said that, including the mayor of Jasper, that this was something that could have been prevented.
Yeah, well, we've heard an awful lot about that, haven't we? The controversies with Parks Canada and everything. Yeah, but I mean, I think he has. I still believe that he's done that preparatory to declaring himself as a candidate in Edmonton to be an MP in Edmonton. But I don't know who he's going to get rid of. I mean, it just so happens that Randy Boissonneau fella, who's been accused of pretending to have First Nations ancestry, that he's the MP in like one of the safer sort of seats there.
Yeah.
So maybe he's going to get turfed.
Well, he could also take over Chandra Arya's seat because he's been informed by the Liberal Party that his nomination as a candidate for the upcoming federal election in Nepean has been revoked. There you go.
Do you think are they willing? Do you think the Liberal Party is willing to look that corrupt? Because that would look so bad, wouldn't it? Just like, we kicked this guy out because we don't really like him, and he ran for leader when he shouldn't have. It was not allowed, but he did it anyway. And now, conveniently, and it's in Ottawa as well, this seat, by the way. Now, conveniently, Mark Carney can be the MP here, and he doesn't even have to leave his gigantic mansion in Rockcliffe Park down the road.
Yeah. And then I understand Ruby Dalla is saying the same thing. Like, it doesn't sound like she's going to make the run, but her post there, she put a meme up. I was going to put it in, but like it was really unclear. Ruby's she's the queen of the meme, but I don't know, that one wasn't very clear. But I doubt if they're going to let her run either.
Yeah, I mean, this just looks terrible. I mean, this guy, Chandra Arya, he already was a controversial figure because he'd gone off on like just completely without telling anybody on his own initiative, went off to India and met with Modi and started saying loads of things. And he's been accused of all manner of like bad behavior, let's say, or like unwise behavior within the Liberal Party. But he only started to attract trouble. It only started to result in trouble, let's say, when he challenged the Liberal establishment. And then that's like, no, you're out, mate. You can't do that. So it's very odd. Why? I mean, the Liberal Party has really given the impression that that they've done this to kind of protect the establishment, and they've done this because they felt they felt offended that he wouldn't back down, and that he decided to stand, and then he sort of embarrassed the party because of that comment that he made about bilingualism or something like that. But it looks terrible, and if that is the case, if they get rid of this guy and then they put in Mark Carney, that would look. I just think that would look so ugly. I mean, I really for their sake and for the sake of Canadian democracy, I hope they don't do that, because that will further decay the trust that Canadians have in democracy here, I think.
I would say don't let anything surprise you. This is just a BC wildfire receives record 1,700 applications for the upcoming wildfire season. So we need to do a lot more mitigation. We can talk about this later at a different point as we approach wildfire season. But we spend so much on fighting wildfires and so little on mitigation. And that's what Daniel Smith has just said there too, right? Like, where was the mitigation that prevented that massive disaster there in Jasper? We sent our one of our journalists out there, Corvin, to one of our local stores. I'm going to play a little clip here from a Kelowna grocer saying, she's helping Canadians helping locals buy Canadian.
Had a couple of employees working pretty hard at reading labels and putting up little flags. Just our customers have asked us for it. They're asking all the our employees all the time where this is from. So yeah, I think it's super helpful. We still do carry a few products that aren't Canadian. But when you look at the shelves, it's just covered in Canadian flags. It makes me very happy.
And you mentioned customers asked for it. What has been the feedback from customers?
Oh, customers come up and thank us all the time. Yeah, that it's great. The other part that our entire meat department and our entire bakery department is all Canadian. So we've just put, bigger signs to let people know that we are a local store. We've always shopped local. So
there's maybe some products you guys aren't.
Good. There you go. You can go watch that full video on KelownaNow.com. But I think a lot of retailers across Canada are trying to help consumers figure out which products are Canadian and or have Canadian ties to them as opposed to other places.
Yeah, but we got an email this morning from Beer Canada. Yeah, that's who it was, the group that represents brewers. They've come out and they've criticized the Saskatchewan government because they're saying their ban on American beer, so-called American beer, is actually hurting Canadian brewers, because it's actually, in many cases, Canadian made, but it just has an American brand on the front, kind of thing. So I mean, there's going to be a lot of examples like that where people kind of get trapped in the middle.
Yeah, our economies are so intertwined. People don't realize it. Like a Ford pickup that's like maybe rolls off the line in maybe even Michigan, or maybe rolls off the line in Ontario, has parts going back and forth, right? I mean, it's not like that it's all done in one place. Like that was part of this intertwining our economy. So it's really tough, like really, really tough. So I don't know,
yeah.
And again, we are a fully owned, independent Canadian media outlet that gets no funding. We're going to talk about media right here. This is a Holly Doan's Blacklock story. And she's come out and said that media is headed towards just one big federal department because it relies so heavily on government funding. And growing subsidies will turn much of Canadians' media into a federally controlled crown corporation, if not a department of the government. And we've seen that, right? An Ottawa think tank said yesterday that Macdonald Laurier Institute, in a report by a former Calgary Herald publisher, warned that media reliance on taxpayer aid was corrosive and self-defeating. Soon, with a very
hard to disagree with that, isn't it? Really, I mean, this chap is the person that wrote this report is the former publisher of the Calgary Herald, so former bigwig at the Calgary Herald, and he recommends that it just all be scrapped because nobody trusts the media anymore in Canada. Which, I mean, You could go and ask your neighborhood dog or cat, and they probably know that by now. Nobody trusts the media, and this certainly doesn't help. I mean, every time we post a story on X or whatever that somebody doesn't like, or many times we do that, one of the first things that they'll say is, "Oh, state-funded media." It's kind of like, well, obviously, no, we aren't. But I can understand why people would think that, because the majority of the sort of major
Yeah.
media outlets in Canada are propped up by the taxpayer.
Yeah, and he's saying soon, with very few bold exceptions, the entire news industry will be essentially a crown corporation. And there's no way to maintain public trust in journalism or freedom of the press. And we are one of those few bold exceptions that continue to operate in this environment where basically the government funds our competition while they have their knee on our throat with Bill C-18 and taken away 200,000 of our earned audience over 10 years. Over a decade, we earned that audience on Facebook of 200,000. And Bill C-18 has stripped that away from us with no compensation whatsoever. And again, we've done tons of stories, and Holly Doan's Black Lux says that the media is selectively supported by the government, the ones that they like.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're kicked to the curb. Meanwhile, you go on, for example, the Local Journalism Initiative, which is just one of many ways that the federal government funds certain media outlets, and you'll see reporters writing stories where they refer to British Columbia, let's say, or Canada, or any sort of proper noun relating to Canadian geography, and they put speech marks around it because it doesn't really exist, apparently, because they dislike the idea of Canada so much that these people will literally say, a man walked down the street in Kelowna with quotes around it, because Kelowna isn't a real thing. That's just a fake name invented by evil colonialists or something like that. It's like, so our taxes pay for that, while the likes of ourselves are, as I say, kicked to the curb and unwanted and despised.
Yeah, and he goes on to say, increasing dependence on public and private media on the government funding is eroding the public's trust in media in general. Our conclusion is that all forms of direct subsidy must end. We encourage public policymakers to consider more consumer market-based forms of funding through donations or subscriptions, especially as media continue to transition and evolve into a largely internet-based platforms. Stats Canada said in a 2023 report that Canadians rated news media less trustworthy than the politicians, judges, and educators and police. So I believe nobody should get money, but they shouldn't be funding select media outlets, and they should give us back our audience. We don't want their money. What we want is the freedom of the press.
And I think that's not only for ourselves, I would say. I think that would also be very much to the benefit of Canada and the Canadian people and Canadian institutions and democracy, because this situation that we're in now is so ugly. It's so toxic, I think, the lack of trust for the media and all the rest of those institutions. I mean, they say the media is less trusted than judges and politicians, but they're pretty darned despised in this country, aren't they? The judicial system and the political parties. And I just think there's this like horrible atmosphere right now. And it isn't just in Canada, obviously. Just look around in other parts of the world, it's also there. But we need to take it seriously. And obviously, propping up certain lowercase l liberal media outlets isn't the answer. That's just going to make it worse. And it has been making it worse.
Yeah, we've done tons of stories on this, and you and I talked about it yesterday even, and talking about how the collapse of media. We're going to see 3 outlets die here in May, completely shut down on the Lower Mainland. Again, all having to do with government intervention that has actually really created chaos in the media outlet. I'm going to show you a chart here. This is Chorus Entertainment. And then if you see, if you look at 2015, and that is the beginning of Justin Trudeau's government, Chorus Entertainment falling off a cliff. I mean, trading around 9 cents right now, and they got a ton of debt, right? Chorus Entertainment, for everybody's knowledge, is Global News.
I mean, it's dire, that, isn't it? When you
look, I can pull up other charts too. Glacier Media, which is another one too. Like, they're all in the same thing. Media is dying in Canada, and their intervention is actually making it worse. They need to leave freedom of the press. and allow press to do its job. Like we talked yesterday, how the CBC reporter clearly is biased. And the reason that she's biased is because she's worried about her job, maybe, right? Because they're definitely, like working for one party. And what kind of democracy survives when the media, the funded media, is definitely rewarded for helping one party versus the other instead of what's better for Canada? They're definitely what's better for themselves.
Yeah, well, and at the very least, you could say they are incentivized by the government, the federal government, controlled by the Liberal Party, to, they're incentivized to report in such a way that is advantageous to the Liberal Party. I mean, you can't doubt that. That is, you could bring in you could do a study on mice in a lab or something like that. It's just as straightforward as that. It's where are the incentives? The incentives for these reporters are very much to make sure that the Liberal Party stays in power, because then the money keeps on flowing. Because
I
if
just
the
want
other guy, if the Conservatives get in, the money might well stop flowing, and that's bad news, obviously, on a personal level for those people.
I just want to stress to Canadians really, really strongly here that a free and independent media is one of the core foundations for democracy. And we can't have that if the media is basically beholding to the government and needing their handouts. And it hasn't helped. Here's the stock. Here's the proof right here. Here's courses. They've been getting the help. They've been getting the help. We've been hanging on without their help. We've been hanging on. We haven't laid off a reporter here in Kelowna now. And most of these other outlets have laid off people in droves, and they've been getting the money from the government, and people don't trust them. So there you go.
In that report, what we didn't, I don't think we really dwelt on that point, but in the report, he actually mentions that. He says there's a glaring lack of published or posted viewpoints critical of the subsidies within the pages and on the websites of news organizations that have lobbied for or received subsidies. I mean, that is completely true. Go and have a look at all of these outlets. I mean, we even did an interview. I did an interview with the Canadian Press, which is a news agency, and it was about Bill C-18, and it was about our situation, and it went out everywhere on the wire because almost every news organization in Canada subscribes to the Canadian Press, and then our friends and allies in Kelowna, like those who shall not be named of the yellow website, they refused to publish it. They didn't put it on their website because they are getting the subsidies, and they didn't want an article out there that would be critical of the subsidies. But I mean, I don't mean to pick on them. They're just doing what they think is important for their company. But the same is true. I mean, and also I would say they're not even very important in the grand scheme in the media landscape. But the actual important companies like CTV and all the rest of them, they also are refusing to do this. And they also didn't publish that article where I was interviewed. They're not interested because that would go against their personal financial interest. So they are sacrificing their integrity, their belief in the freedom of the press, because their bottom line depends on that.
Yeah, Holly Jones from Blacklocks refuses to take any of that money. She said that she can't have freedom of the press. But she's been attacked in many other ways. There's a court case that she's been fighting for the last 10 years as well. So, definitely the very selective in their support and very aggressive in the media outlets that are definitely which are critical of them.
Yeah, and I feel like maybe it's probably quite easy for us to lose people here when we talk about this because it might seem a bit abstract. But the bottom line is, this whole system is really, really bad for Canadian democracy. And if you believe in democracy, if you like the idea of democracy, it would really pay to learn about this and be interested in this, and maybe ask your MP about it or something.
Let's move on to some of the more world stuff here. Flights in and out of London, Heathrow last week, and that has to do. I'll let you go with that one.
Yeah, there's a mysterious fire at Heathrow. Just in the last sort of 10 minutes, they've said that they might be able to get some flights out of the airport today, or into and out of the airport today. But earlier on, they were saying that it was going to be shut down for the whole of Friday. And that is, I don't know. I mean, most people listening to us now probably realize how important Heathrow is, because it's like, it's one of the few airports in the world that serves as like the nexus for flights
It's a hub.
from Asia
Yeah,
going to the US,
yeah. It's a
from Asia
big
going
hub.
to Africa, from North America going to Asia, and so on. It's like it is. You just look at it on that map there, that flight radar map, and it makes sense because it's right in the middle of the population
It's
centers of the world, really, isn't it?
and then
So
and
this
if
is
you
like really bad news.
it's like the UK is Chicago. Chicago is a similar type thing, right? It's a huge hub for everything connects in there, right? So yeah, so it's a massive airport that's very, very important to world travel.
Yeah, and I just think it's nuts that an airport like that can just shut down for a whole day. I mean, that is such a vulnerability, and a
What?
lot of people in England have started to say like started to highlight just how vulnerable crucial infrastructure in that country actually is. And that's just the that's just the British context. But I think that also applies to Canada. I mean, if a nefarious actor, because the terrorism police are looking at this, we should say, but if a a malicious actor in Canada wanted to cause some huge damage, they really could. Like they could blow up pipelines and stuff like that. I mean, this sort of should be a wake-up call, I think, of
And I
how
think
vulnerable a lot of the
and I,
systems are.
and I think we're starting to see that even the smaller scale and these people that don't like which party gets elected or whatever, and they're, like, I mean, we're going to talk about it later. They're, like starting Teslas on fire. They just get braver and braver, and then, they're going after infrastructure and different things. But we'll get into that a little bit later. Here's I don't know if this is the good news, bad news. This is good news, bad news. Klarna now lets you pay later deal with DoorDash. Like, like
I mean, take out a mortgage to buy a burrito.
yeah, like,
It's
pay
absolutely insane, isn't it?
3 installments on your burritos, right? Like, come on.
I mean, it just feels a little bit odd that the obvious would need to be articulated there, which is if you cannot afford to pay for a burger to be delivered to your house, don't buy it. Don't do that. I mean, is that not the most obvious thing in the world?
And I've just let people know that a lot of these delivery services, you think you're getting the same prices. Like I've seen, like, even with Costco, like the Costco sells those nuclear chickens, I call them, for like $7.99 if you go in store. If you order it off of one of these apps, the price of that chicken is $10.99. And then plus there's a delivery fee, plus there's a tip, plus, like the service fee, all these other pluses. So that chicken actually starts out like 20-30% higher just for ordering it online. Then plus you add the delivery fee, plus you add, plus. And a lot of these people are just like, oh, convenience. Maybe if better planning, just go to the store once a week or something and plan a little bit.
Yeah, but it's just like maybe in 10 years, right? If the cyber taxi thing takes off, then we can comfortably have our food chauffeured to our front door. When we can't be bothered to get up off the sofa. Like that might be okay. But what the situation we're in now is people who are not on particularly high incomes are asking or paying a fee so that somebody will cook them a meal and then somebody else will drive it in a taxi to their house. I mean, and I say, and they're not doing this on rare occasions. They're doing this like every day. I know people that do this for
Yeah,
multiple meals each day,
yeah.
and I just think we're not there yet. I feel like not only are they not there in terms of their income, but basically nobody is, but we're not there even in technological terms, and it just seems there's something about it that just seems wrong as well. It's like because a lot of the times it's Uber drivers that do this. Uber drivers, like they might take a person somewhere or they might take a burger somewhere, and it's kind of like, what are we doing? Why are we doing this?
Yeah, it's nonsense. The U.S. government is closing the main Canadian access to the Haskell Free Library and Opera House, an iconic building that straddles the border between Quebec and Vermont, according to town library officials. There you go.
Yeah, and apparently that Christy Nome, is she called? Yeah, that's her name.
Yeah,
Christy Nome from
Christine. Yeah.
the Homeland Security. She apparently went there a couple of months ago, and she's being blamed for this. They're saying that because she had a personal experience of this, she's cracked down on it personally. But I mean, she hasn't said that. There's no evidence that that's the case. That's just the accusation. But the person who's like in charge of the board of trustees or something claims that when she visited, she walked over to the Canadian side and started to say 51st state over and over again, which I just think is like, I mean, are they being that petty now? Are they being that cringe? But I guess they are.
We got a clip here to play from your old friend there from, you used to be the Prime Minister of the UK. You're going to play a small clip of this interview she did with Glenn Beck.
I'm utterly puzzled, and the Canadians. I'm not going to tell the Canadians how to vote. Obviously, I want the Conservatives to be elected in Canada, but I think it's Justin Trudeau has pursued a lot of the same policies that Europe has been pursuing, and America has raced ahead of us. Back at the turn of the millennium, the average Brit was catching up with the average American in terms of income per head.
Wow.
We are now $34,000 a year behind. We are poorer than Mississippi, which is the poorest American state.
There you go.
I mean, she's not the. She's in no way could you say that she's the sharpest syringe in the medical locker. I think she's actually. She would almost qualify for special needs.
She's almost looks like she has
educational treatment.
Syringe in her hand there, it looks like.
Yeah, it looks like it, doesn't it? I think that's why I said syringe. That's like Freudian, wasn't it?
There you go.
But anyway, yeah, she's not. So she isn't the sharpest or the shiniest, but she's right there, isn't she? I mean, there's nothing that I can disagree with there. That's correct. When she talks about Europe and Canada being left behind by the US in GDP per capita, that's just nothing that can be said against that.
The only reason I played that clip is because it was basically what you and I have been saying now for weeks, right? Like the UK has been stumbling around, and Canada's been stumbling around and feeling their way through the dark as well. And then that visit with Mark Carney to England, Stromer didn't exactly provide Mark Carney anything of value.
No, because he's risk averse, Keir Starmer, and he didn't want to risk upsetting Donald Trump. So he tried to do it in a kind of bungled, weird way. I'm sure behind closed doors he was phoning and friendly with Carney, but he didn't want to get Donald Trump's attention in a bad way, which tells you everything you need to know about the Western Alliance, really. People care about America. They don't really care about each other within that alliance.
Here's another firestorm that's going on in the United States, where the New York Times is putting out this piece saying that Elon Musk was being briefed on attack plans for the Americans attacking China, which I found to be completely kind of weird. And why would they brief him, especially when he has businesses in China? And now they're saying that was both Musk and Trump are saying that's fake news.
That's an enormous claim to make, that, isn't it, by the New York Times? I mean, I would imagine they have sources. I don't think the New York Times would just fabricate sources entirely out of thin air. But it sounds like they maybe haven't vetted those sources to make sure that they're, telling the truth.
That they don't have a bias towards why they would want to say something like that to get some more hate out there. Mario Canseco, we've interviewed him a few times. I think it's time to get him back in here for the federal election as well. And he says that there is ongoing, renewing support for the monarchy after the death of Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah, and he links it to the confrontation, whatever word you want to use, with the United States right now under Trump. But what's interesting here is that the largest group of people here still want Canada to be a republic or have an elected head of state. I doubt that they want an elected monarch there. So, I mean, still, the monarchy is not exactly doing brilliantly, I would say, but it's certainly doing better now since the Trump malarkey.
And then you put this other one in here too, Prince William in Estonia.
Yeah, I just think, the royals, they're leaning into this potential war with Russia, aren't they? He's got his little uniform on, and he's got a tank, and he's, a couple of dozen miles away from the Russian border there in Estonia. So I don't know. I think that's they're leaning into this the vibe shift when it comes to the military and Russia, I think.
The photo op, right? The photo op.
Yeah, but they always try to stay ahead of whatever social panic or what have you, whatever social developments are occurring. The royals always try and stay ahead of that, and they're pretty good at doing that as well. So, I mean, for anyone out there that's worried about potentially being conscripted or something like that, I would say this is not what you want to see, really.
Gold, a little bit off today, but still holding that $3,000 mark. Definitely, again, the geopolitics coming into play there. We talked a lot about gold this week. You can go back and listen to. We got all of our episodes are on colonelnow.com and on our YouTube channel, so you can go and listen to. Ian and I, if you want to build trust in media, we try not to tell you a story. We try to tell you like it is. So, because we don't get any money from the government. So, crypto.
No, we don't have any line to push.
Right. Maybe if you send us hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe we'll be biased towards you. We can tell stories about you. How's that? That's a joke. No, but crypto, like still bouncing in that area. The chart looks like it wants to move higher. If I was a technical analyst, I would look at that and say, that looks interesting, right? Canadian dollar, definitely below the 69-cent mark there. And the 72 thing showed up because somebody hovered over that for a second, but when they screenshotted that. But it's at 0.69, so there you go. In our AI and tech world, the announcement was made that Optimus is going into production. There you go. And then AI infrastructure, lots of stuff going on in AI infrastructure, lots of companies, again, energy, the big deal. And that's where, Canada comes into play. We've talked about this endlessly. Energy, 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 energy. I'm going to play this clip here from, because Tesla's getting a lot of negative news. Elon Musk did a mission update here. And we're going to play a little clip here from the Tesla mission.
Mission is to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy.
It's only possible because of the incredible people here at Tesla. They are absolutely committed to the cause of sustainable energy, and that is why we can do what no other company can do. We can make lower cost products that are still efficient and compelling, and we can make them at scale. We're going to build them all in compact and high output factories that are easy for us to build quickly.
We work together in a way that allows us to ask the hard questions.
This is the product that will retire fossil fuels.
We're not just creating products, we're creating a movement towards sustainable energy for everyone.
What we're trying to convey is a message of hope and optimism. Optimism that is based on actual physics. Earth can and will move to a sustainable energy economy, and will do so in your lifetime.
The solution to scalable FSD is getting the architecture, the data, and the compute just right. And we have assembled a world-class team to execute on this.
Every truck that we put on the road that replaces a diesel truck makes a huge difference towards driving us towards our total mission of sustainable energy and transportation.
You can see and you can feel the collaboration that's happening and the pride that everyone has in working for Tesla.
There you go. There you go. Tesla, a leading company and leading in many of the leading fields in the world and getting so much hate these last little while. But Elon Musk has also said, drill, baby, drill. He knows it's all about energy. And again, I wrote that piece on my LinkedIn talking about how Canada has put its best players on the bench. That's our oil and gas, our LNG, all of our energy, basically, and our resources have been placed on the bench while we play minor leaguers. And the minor leaguers are the wind and the solar right now. And they've been put to the forefront and been put on the ice by Canada while our superstars sit on the bench. Well, we can do both. And if we look at Norway as an example, how they use their oil and gas to build a prosperous nation, and then and they still transfer, and their own economies is becoming very green as well. I mean, almost 100% of their cars, their new cars are EVs. But people should have a choice, and especially in Canada here, have a choice. Especially we have a very large landmass, so some of the vehicles right now just won't work if they're electric.
Yeah. I mean, it's sustainable is doing a lot of work there, isn't it? I mean, it depends on your timeline, I think. It's not sustainable if we dig up all of the cobalt in the
Well,
on our planet, is it? But yeah, I mean, not I don't know what, yeah, I'm not really sure why they use that word sustainable because, it doesn't make sense to me. I think clean is probably the better way to
a,
do it because you
a
don't
lot of
get
this,
pollution that comes out of the exhaust in an
a
EV.
lot of a lot of the stuff is recyclable. But one of the things that why I wanted to play this is I watched the whole presentation last night with Elon Musk as well, and he definitely he took a lot of questions from his employees. He definitely seems very tired. I think he's taking on way more than he should, and he should focus on his mission and myself. And I think Donald Trump is using him as his beard right now, and all the hate is being directed to this one man, and it's definitely wearing on him and wearing on his company.
Yeah, well, I mean, you'd think that he would put in a temporary CEO or something in Tesla, or it's weird that he's decided to keep all of his old jobs and then take on this new one, which is like all consuming. Obviously, that would cause anybody to show signs of stress.
Yeah, no, definitely. But again, this company is leading in so many of the leading fields: AI, robotics, autonomy, like it's energy, whole bunch of things, right? And then here we go in Toronto now. This is catching on in Canada, as it's been all over the U.S. And this is really I brought it up too. 80 Teslas damaged at Tesla dealerships, shot up. They're shooting them. They're lighting them on fire. And this is really how the left responds right now. Is they go on, when Bud Light thing went out there, and then there was a protest from the right side, the Republicans or the whatever conservatives. They just stopped buying the product. And then when the left gets mad, they just start burning it down.
Yeah, I guess we're at the next level now, aren't we? There's been other ones, haven't there? Like Chick-fil-A is another one that was targeted that was from the left side, and obviously Disney from the right. But yeah, this seems to be like a new level for sure, and I think it's being justified. A lot of it is being justified because Elon Musk did that thing where he waved at people and said, "I love you from the bottom of my heart," and waved. And I honestly think it's like a lot of it goes back to that. A lot of people seem to think that was genuinely a Nazi salute.
I think that's a rally cry. I think they're saying in the United States right now that these are funded protests, and we've seen that with a bunch of other protests that have been funded by the left side. That they fund these protests, and like they say that even some of these college campus stuff is funded as well. So.
Yeah, but I think that's, to me anyway, it's like if you can persuade yourself and you can persuade other people that Elon Musk is genuinely a Nazi, like absolutely 100% authentic fascist Nazi, then obviously you're going to be able to persuade yourself to go and set fire to a car or something like that, smash some windows. Because if you really think that this guy is like the second coming of Hitler, then you're going to feel a moral obligation to do something about it, aren't you? So I think it goes back to that. There's a fundamental misunderstanding of who he is and what he wants, I would suggest.
I got some memes for you this hour. We're going to close it off. We're near the end here. We're a little bit over our hour, but we got some, as usual, we got the fun at the end, right? Here's all the fun at the end. So, ready? For the average Canadian, this is a good one. There's just visually, so you can see when you get to keep some of your money. For the first half of the year almost, you get to work for the government so they can hire, what was it, 824 employees to collect the carbon tax from you? What was that number? I can't remember. Somewhere in there, right?
I think it was 400 and something, yeah. But I mean, the overall administration costs in the lifetime of the carbon tax was $200 million. So that's a lot of people working to pay taxes for that.
Yeah, so there you go. So then you get to work. All the red days are for the government. The blue days you get to keep, right?
It's very kind of the government to let us keep that, isn't it?
One of the policies I'd like to see Pierre Poilievre put out there is at 65 years of age, that those people pay zero tax from then on. Like especially on the CPP and OAS and stuff like that. They shouldn't be taxing that. That's your retirement income. You worked your whole life here in Canada for it, and then they tax it and claw it back. So CPP and OAS, if you're listening, Pierre, I know that Chrystia Friedland listens, and they're probably going to steal that idea from us, but there you go. Chrystia, it's a great idea no matter what, right? Zero tax.
I think that would be a very, very, very tough sell in the current economic environment, considering that pensioners, retirees are some of the most prosperous people in Canadian society.
Well,
so I don't think that's going to go down well.
I'm just saying the CPP and OAS, which doesn't amount to much. I mean, have you checked what it is? I actually qualify for it now. And it's not that much after working for, my whole life. Since the day I turned 16, I went to work full time at the sawmill on the green chain. So my whole life. And it doesn't amount to much at all. Right? You couldn't live off of it.
Yeah, it seems odd to tax that, I must say. Yeah.
You couldn't live off of it. That's all you had. Like paying rent or whatever. Like, there's no way. So stop taxing CPP and OAS. Period. There you go. There's a platform piece for anybody that wants to grab it. They've taken some of our other ones, right? The no GST on homes.
That actually would be quite a shrewd move from Pierre Poilievre, because the Conservatives have started to really lose the retirees, and they're very much a constituency now of the Liberal Party. So that would be quite a wise little policy move from the Conservatives.
Yeah. And then the other one I really like is no tax on overtime to incentivize people to work more, right? And
yeah, I mean, that seems to be a no-brainer. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. We're doling out the ideas.
Yeah, policy factory.
Policy factory, and no fee daycare for everybody. Not this $10 daycare for like people that nobody gets. Like, unbelievable. Anyway, here's another meme for Canadians sweating it out because they can't decide whether not to buy U.S. goods or Chinese goods, right? Because they're both hammering us with tariffs, but the Chinese one gets downplayed a lot. But except in Saskatchewan, where Scott Moe's drawing a lot of attention to it. But.
Well, the funny thing is, yeah, it is being downplayed here, but it also seems like in the US, the Republicans are downplaying the threat from China as well, while they, upplay the threat from Canada, supposed threat from Canada. So we're just in a crazy time right now.
Yeah, man. And if you're married, this one's for you. The wife doesn't like the tone of your okay text.
It's a very good stock image that they've used, isn't it?
Yeah, and then this one here relates to what's going on with the Teslas here. Leftist smashes Tesla after seeing terrifying images of a fascist in the window.
And that's another good stock image, actually. They've done well here with the images.
Yeah, there you go. So, yeah, I think a lot of these people, what they do need is a dictionary to understand what fascist means and to understand a lot of these terms.
Certainly the word authoritarian, I feel a lot of people in the Western world have just completely forgotten what that word means, if they ever did know what it means. Like, for example, during COVID, those policies were authoritarian, and yet they were never described as being that. And I just feel like, words and labels, they often bear little relationship to what the definition says in the dictionary, do they? They're just thrown around as insults, really.
I think in our funny section here, though, we'll put out this out there for media outlets. Words that media outlets are no longer allowed to use ever since the COVID thing. Expert. I think that's a good word. Existential. Not allowed to use that word anymore. Yeah. Threat to democracy.
Misinformation and disinformation.
And disinformation. There you go. We should write a story on that, actually. Those words are should be banned from media outlets for 5 years.
Yeah, especially when they're put in the same sentence, like existential misinformation and climate crisis.
And threat to yeah, the meme we did yesterday was one of the better ones, right? Where we said Tesla's lighting on fire blamed on the climate change. Anyway, that's our week, and we do appreciate you coming. These videos, the news hours is on KelownaNow.com. You can go on our site and you can see them. They're published right after we're done here. And then they're on our YouTube channel. They're on our X channel. I think we're live streaming to a Facebook site that we have that is not our real one. We kind of put up a different one until they find it and delete that one as well. Anyway, we also have a newsletter that goes out 365 days a year, 7 days a week, and it hits your inbox before 7 a.m. Who could ask for anything better? And it's all free.
Exactly.
Yeah, and free from government funding too. There you go.
Yeah, free in both senses of the word.
Yeah, there you go. I'm Jim Check with Kelowna Now, Ian Burns, and from our managing editor all the way out there in Ottawa. We do appreciate, especially the people that are in listening all the time. Ian Leslie, one of those people that's commenting lots, and Brett. Where's Brett from anyway? Like he always says it's a different time, and Brett was in there earlier. Oh yeah, so there you go. We got lots of regulars, and we appreciate that. And if you could share it with your friends and get them watching too, that'd be much appreciated. And like I said, we're trying to interact with our viewers at the same time. You don't get a lot of that from the national mainstream media because it's all about you at the end of the day. And we do thank you for watching Kelowna Now.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.